In this episode, I speak with luminary intuitive Robin Sandomirsky about the single most important practice she teaches people and businesses: how to unburden their internal operating systems with self-compassion and experience more ease through pure awareness and embodiment practices. Welcome to the Flower Lounge, a place for conversations with wildly creative people and a little plant-loving wisdom to help you experience life in full bloom. I'm Katie Hess, flower alchemist and founder of LOTUSWEI, and I believe in a world where we're all living at our personal edge. Welcome to the Flowerlounge Podcast. I have on with us one of our regular guests. Robin Sandomirsky was with us in episode 13, where she talked about her best friend dying and all the incredible insights she gained from that. And also episode 86, where we talked about making your relationship with yourself your primary priority. Today we have Robin jumping on with us again, and I'm very excited. Robin works as a spiritual guide and luminary. She works one-on-one with small businesses and in small groups, and she supports people and teaches feminine embodied awakening practices. She's a single mom of 2 in New England with a dog that likes to rifle through the trash.
Right.
And named like Castle James, and a senile cat. What's your cat's name?
My senile cat is named Sophia, and then I have a second cat who is not yet senile named Ivy.
Cool. So we thought, because Robin is in collaboration with us as a practitioner for both EARTHAURA and our retreat in Costa Rica that we do every November, as well as with the Center International. So I thought it would be interesting today to just talk about what is it like to work with Robin. I've been personally and in the business working with Robin for the last few years. And it's been incredible. And I think because we're working so closely together, I forget, just how I kind of understand how she works. I understand how you work, but most people don't. And so we thought it would be interesting to have a conversation about just what is it like to work with you. And I know you have such a huge toolkit that you're probably working different with different people. So
Absolutely.
maybe we could talk about that.
Sure. So I have a very eclectic style in the way that I approach working with people, just because I have trained in so many different ways, and I didn't personally land in one set lineage, which I know that some people did, and I have a huge respect for. So I actually started as a telepathic animal communicator. And then from there, I met a shaman who I trained and worked really closely with for many, many years. And I also, from there, sort of shot off into training in a lot of different other ways with intuitive and energy modalities. And I sort of say that I when I am doing both group work and session work, I really experience myself as sort of having my primary thinking and egoic self step out of the way. And I feel as though I'm sort of allowed to have the opportunity to be guided by a sense of what I would say are my guides or my team or some just sort of realm of wisdom that knows much more than just my little human self struggling along here on the planet. So you're correct in that if you come for one-on-one sessions, really each person's experience is very much their own. My thought process is not that I'm doing something for or to people, but that I have the opportunity to hold space and offer maybe some support and amplification around their own capacity for their own system to sort of complete and align itself. So that's part of where I'm coming from. So that is part of my model. One of the other things that I talk about a lot in sort of how I approach working with people, what I'll do is I'll say to them, do me a favor, pick up a pen and draw a really small circle. And then around that, draw a much bigger circle. And I'm like, that's my really complex map of your basic human and how we work. And the inside center circle, I describe as like our true self or our true awareness or awake awareness. And that is, I think, sort of the energy state that we have access to when we're not in story and we're not hooked in thought and we're not sort of being influenced by any suffering or trauma that our system has. It's just those moments we get where all we are is present in the now, and we experience our own sort of, not like we're trying to be compassionate or we're trying to be present, but that actually what we are is presence, and that presence has an innate compassion. So one of the things that I'm doing when I work with people in any setting is I'm trying to help them to discover the tools and practices that work for them experientially to discover that being state in themselves. And then the outside circle that's bigger, I refer to as the operating system. And I say that the operating system is made up of, and at some point along the line, I started saying 463 parts. That means that number is arbitrary. But those are all the little pieces and parts of ourselves that were created either through our lineage and our ancestors, or if we believe in past lives, those might have an effect. And then also all our present life, any suffering or trauma or all those tiny little hurts we experience on a day-to-day basis, especially in our childhood and our formative years when we're trying biologically to survive and we're being really shaped by our environment, that those create little parts of our operating system that have certain beliefs that affect how we engage with the world. And most of the time in modern day society, I believe that most of us are merged with some part of our operating system throughout the day. And that's where we're operating from the world from, or with the world from. And so, and most of those parts of the operating system are carrying what I would refer to as a burden or a charge around a certain belief that affects what they believe is true and affects how we engage with the world. So we're in a moment of pain, and so that part of the operating system is engaging with the world from that place of pain. So the second piece of the work is, can we locate and get to know different parts of that operating system and unburden them so that there isn't such an intense charge around that? So the goal is that we also begin to be able to have our awareness notice when we go to merge with a part and come back home to pure awareness instead. So each of the parts feels supported by this central being state, as opposed to that what we a lot of the time experience is like one part comes up and is like, has an idea about what we should do. And then another part comes up that's another part of the operating system and has a judgment or response to that. And then we have these two parts of ourselves that are sort of like in disagreement over something. And we're kind of pinging back and forth between the two of them. When we bring awareness in, awareness can see each of the parts and maybe validate their fear or their opinion. And then we can kind of know how we want to move through our life from this place of awareness. So that's all. And I think if you meet a person who you see that you're inspired by, like we are all sort of attracted to certain people who seem calm and clear and grounded, and what I would say is like more awakened. Those people have developed a capacity, I believe, to come from that pure awareness. And that awareness state, as opposed to being merged with a part, and that awareness state is not unfeeling. It's totally comfortable with feelings and sensations and doesn't need to judge them or attach to them. So that's my basic human model. I think the more we develop our capacity to locate and stay in that awareness, the more comfortable we feel in ourselves and our lives, no matter what's going on externally. So then we also begin to often to see our external world change as our own being state changed. But I sort of approach everything from turning to the internal. And we talked about this in the last podcast, right? Because we were talking about it in relationship. And if you find yourself in a friendship, or if you're anybody's friend or mother or daughter or sister or colleague or lover, you might have had the experience of feeling some of your stuff come up in that relationship. And over the years, more and more clearly, my dedication has been to notice that parts of me are being activated and that I'm merging with them in response to what's happening. And then to try to turn inwards and tend to those parts. And then later to return to assessing whatever was happening in the relationship.
So what does that look like for you personally in terms of time frame? Do you just, if something triggers you, you just sort of take a time out and take the time you need until you feel a shift and then go back to that conversation or person? Or
yeah, that's a really good question. I would say my answer is that it depends on the intensity of the situation and the response. And in moments where I can feel a more minor irritation or activation, it might be as simple as that I seem a little quieter for a few breaths, and then I'm sort of right back where I was. And in moments where things are more heated, it might look like me calling a total timeout on the conversation and removing myself from the conversation to go be with myself. And that might mean I don't return to the conversation for 2 hours, and it might mean 2 weeks. In my highest, the stakes get higher the more the relationship and the conversation matter to you. So I used to find that as the stakes got higher, I lost my ability to pause and turn inwards. It was like the higher the stakes were, the harder it became for me to do that. I would say in the recent years, one of my biggest gifts to myself has been flexing that muscle more and more, and learning that no matter how wrong I think the other person is, and how much I am just married to that I'm right and they're wrong, and if they would just get that they were wrong, I would feel better. Those are the moments where if I'm brave enough to pause and look inwards and see who's inside me that's hurting, I'm really reaping very profound personal reward from putting down, I have this sense that I can be right or I can be free. And the older I get, the more interested I am in my freedom. What often happens then is in the hours or days or weeks later when I return to the topic, but I've done my own internal work, I still think the person was wrong. I don't always then be like, oh, they were right. I'm like, oh, I still think that person kind of said the wrong thing, or that person expressed their opinion to me in a way that was unkind. But instead of it being like a raging, I need to never be friends with this person again because they were so wrong, I can be like, hey, the way that you said that to me kind of hurt my feelings, which is really different,
Yeah, and something that it brings to mind is that in the West here, there's a lot of talking it out. It just, having been in the East for 3 months, it's like a huge contrast of a lot more quiet inner experience realm versus in the West. I think there's a huge just kind of cultural habit, especially for women, of like, let's get to the bottom of this and talk this through. Talk about the benefits of the method of going off to be alone and be quiet and tend to your parts so that you can approach that conversation differently versus that sort of urgent driving need to like figure it out through talking about it in the heat of the moment, which I just find a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. That's such an interesting question. Like, one of the ways that I want to answer is that I've developed a practice of sort of like assessing where I be at energetically. And to me, that has been part of my like embodiment process, where like if I'm in a conversation that's getting more intense and I start to feel disconnected from my body, that is a sure sign that I need to pause. If I am in a conversation that's getting more intense and I still feel grounded in my body and I feel a sense of connection to the earth beneath me, then it's possible that I'm actually staying more in my present awareness. And I might be able to handle a more intense conversation, because it's not that I never can. It's that if I've gotten pulled out of my pure awareness and into my operating system, which has my protectors activated, like this person is harmful, or this person doesn't love me enough, this isn't safe, I'm feeling disrespected, like that stuff getting kicked up for me when I'm in my operating system, I often feel what we might refer to as like dissociated or in the head, or those other signs that our body gives us that we're in some kind of like really like neurological response, right? That's not just present awareness. So we hear a lot of talk about this, the difference between reacting and responding, right? And so responding, I'm calmer and I'm grounded. And even if I'm angry or I'm upset, I have a sense of my own presence and my own, like there's a feeling state to it, which I think is, to me, I'm really, really, really 110% convinced at this point in my own evolution that in this earthly experience, the only awakening that happens is embodied. And any time that we are leaving to go experience something, it's either spiritual escapism or we're overwhelmed and so we've detached from our body. But so I do use sort of, do I still feel sensations in my body? Am I aware of them as sensations, or have I totally checked out to a story? Can I breathe? Right? Like those are helpful cues to me about, can I stay in a conversation or do I need a break from a conversation? And often I have the experience that when I pause the conversation and turn back towards myself, I feel this like this returning to feeling, like physical feeling again. I've had my partner reflect back at me that like he'll see my body language change when I go to make that internal change, in which point I've actually stopped engaging with him. But that he will see me do it, like he can tell that I do it, and my body language shifts. So there's a physicality to it that's different, that can help to cue me to where I'm at. Because part of it is we unconsciously go to our patterning, right? It's the lack of choice in merging with the parts. And then we're just like engaging this patterning. So it's like bringing our consciousness. So even if my awareness can just notice that I went, I'm already hugely ahead of if I've just merged and I have no idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know if I just answered your question.
You did.
Okay. So it's one of the reasons I'm into encouraging all of us to begin to have ways that we notice our own embodiment, because it's one of the ways that we can notice if we're in presence and awareness or if we're in operating system and patterning. And so I like to have a sense of coming home to the body as part of that. I said it's a two-pronged process. And so part of it is feeling, what does it feel like in my body when I'm in awake awareness, embodied awake awareness? And what does it feel like in my body when I'm merged with a part?
So what about for more subtle cases? Like it feels like it's easier to tell the difference when it's really extreme. Like when you're really angry or really upset, it's clear.
Yeah.
But then when so for example, like you're working with a ton of different clients and types of people.
Yeah.
There'll be times where in a session with you, I might say something and I feel very calm and I'm not upset about anything. But you'll be like, whoa, wait, stop, hold on. Because you're catching something that's coming from a pattern response. So how do you identify and how do we begin to self-identify the most nuanced, subtle expressions of those pattern behaviors? Is it just waiting? Is it patience? Is it watching, looking at what we think is right and then watching it for a while? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. I have a practice that I work with people with. I may have mentioned it before. I call it "Oh, hello." And it's like in any situation where like we might notice a couple different thoughts or ideas or beliefs that arise. So let's say like I have an interaction with my neighbor that feels a little bit off. And I start to think like, oh, did I do something wrong? Or is she upset with me? Or is it just that she's having a bad day? Like, so little stuff is coming up, but this isn't like in the heat of a dramatic fight with like a close family member. So even there, I could be like, oh, there's a part of me that's worried that I did something wrong. There's a part of me that's assuming that she's acting like that because she's upset with me. So it's like my oh, hello is like, oh, hello part that is feeling a little insecure and worried that I did something wrong. Or, oh, hello part that has a belief that I'm sometimes misunderstood. So now I'm noticing that I think maybe she's misunderstanding me. So there's a practice of getting to know yourself. So there's the self-study of seeing what you believe to be true about yourself, what you believe to be true about how you experience the world and how you are experienced by the world. And as you learn that, you can start to notice more and more nuanced moments where that patterning arises. So does that answer that at all? It's like
it does, but I also just think that we probably need that there is value in having an accountability partner such as yourself, because sometimes it's just so subtle. It's so subtle that there's nothing that feels off at all. And I'm thinking of a particular conversation where we were talking about something, and my pattern behavior is like making things easy for people.
Yeah.
So when it's like so subconscious, you don't even see it. what's the value of having somebody who can see through it and can just be like, whoa, 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 that's your thing. And it's
So
so subtle.
I think, again, like the older I get, I feel like I'm so old now. The older I get, the more I'm like, the model of independence is terrible and false. And we will not actually experience awakening on our own without support or help or nurturance or guidance from other beings along the way. And so I myself literally have been working with the same guide on and off, and mostly on, for just short of 20 years. And 100% still that person holding space for me to catch and see and awaken to my own patterning amplifies my process 10,000-fold on a year-to-year basis. So I'm a huge proponent that it be imperative, if you're holding yourself to a certain wish for yourself, of unburdening your operating system and coming into your own pure awareness and experiencing your own just like innate, inherent, creative life force energy greatness, that is a lifelong practice, and it's a practice that warrants support and guidance, whether it's and probably more than one, right? So I have my like teacher that I've worked with for so long, and then I have people like you who will hold me accountable on my path, and I have other friends and loved ones in my life who know what I'm up to, who will reflect back at me like, I can see your patterning right now. Do you want to work on that? And so I think that, to me, that's important. And what I was going to say is, like, the older I get, the more I think that, if I'm just speaking plainly, like, everyone should just have help. And that should just be like normative, instead of like, because you're in a crisis or something terrible is going on or something's wrong with you. And whether that help is, you know, from a close friend or from a group setting or from some kind of teacher or whatever it is, I think that we all need it. And so I certainly practice what I preach. And then you start to, if you have a talented person that you're working with, they start to do it in a way where you'll also then start to catch it yourself, right?
It's like a neutral objective pointing out or reflecting back.
Yeah, and it's like an invitation to look and notice, like a does this feel true and accurate to you, that maybe there's a part of you that feels like you have to save this person, when the reality might be that this person can be responsible for themselves, and then there could be like a collaborative journey that you're on with someone. So that would be an invitation in that moment. Hopefully in your work with me, you felt also like you could have been like, no, that doesn't feel like patterning, right? Like, it's always an inquiry and an invitation to feel into, oh gosh, yeah, that is that part of me that I have that feels responsible for others, right?
So what does that feel like to you? Like, as you're talking to someone, because you're probably, you know, people talk about going to see intuitives and psychics and yada, 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 yada. But in my experience, that quality is extremely rare. You can count those people on one hand that you meet in a lifetime who are legitimately tapping into something that is pure and true and timeless, that will always be true. I mean, things are always changing in life. The fabric of life is always changing. But there's a difference between like the human Robin. I see it, right? Like,
Yeah.
I can hang out with the human Robin and drink the coffee and have kombucha and a green juice and hang out with the human Robin. And then there's the Robin that I work with in sessions.
Yeah.
Who even has a different tone of voice and different cadence of speaking. And so what does that feel like to you when you are working with someone and sort of not putting human Robin to the side, but just sort of really tuning into somebody in a way that's pure and true?
Okay. I want to answer that in a few different ways. The first way is to say that I feel so profoundly grateful that I get to have that experience. Like it never ceases to like amaze me that am lucky enough to have the experience that I get to sit in such a grace-filled way with other humans on the planet. And it's like that I'm trusted, or that this process is trusted, and that it gets to be safe and open and vulnerable and present and all the things that I've experienced it as being. And I love it and I enjoy it, and I feel just lucky that I get to spend my time doing that. And I sometimes will have this experience of like, oh, I think I brought something to this person's life. And I'm like, I'll have these moments where I'm like, that's enough. Like, I'm complete. I'm totally complete. So that is the first part of my answer. It feels like, it's funny. I've had this experience in parenting sometimes, and in like being around other people's children, or like, I think what I'm trying to say is I don't always realize that I'm being intuitive when I'm being intuitive, and I'll just like know something, and then later it will turn out that the just knowing was on target, and I don't realize that like everyone in the room just didn't just know that. And so it still sometimes I'll have to remember to speak up or gently offer something if I'm kind of like, if I'm in a space where it's welcome, because I just like, I don't always notice that my intuition is opening or available. When I'm in a position, whether it's in a group or one-on-one, or like even in like a business consulting session where I'm being asked to use my intuition, I have a very clear way that I open and close. And my experience is that I'm asking that the other person or person's systems be the leader and just show what is of service, most best service to their system coming into its awakening. And then I just kind of have to let go and trust. And that has taken years and years and years of practice, of believing that it's okay to follow what I'm sensing, and then to describe it and put it into language and get really clear on it and do it in a way where, because I personally don't enjoy being told something about myself by someone else. So I believe that because of that, I have efforted to have a practice where my intuition is always an offering and not an assertion, which sort of also then circles back to my, like, I don't do anything for people. I'm trying to help to highlight stuff that it's like, you already know everything I'm going to tell you, and I'm just like making it crystal clear so you can decide how you want to engage with it, or what you want to turn towards, or is there compassion available for that, or can we language it in a way that feels relatable, right?
And what are some of the experiences that you've had with people, or results is a funny word, but results that people have experienced from working with you for months or years at a time?
Sure. So one of the things I want to say is that like in my whole like opening of like I'm so grateful and this is so great, one of the experiences that I've had over and over and over again in my lifetime in working with people is this moment where I'll sort of like go into my zone and I'll kind of get rolling and I'll be describing to someone like there's this happening inside of you and then there's this part that's responding like this and then there's this like this and this like this, and then I'll like open my eyes up and look at them and they're like like how did you just like read my whole insides like that? And I've never experienced it in a way where they're upset about it. I've always experienced it in a way where the person feels like seen and held, and that like the struggle that they're in is valid. Because it's like, of course there's part of you that's afraid and there's this part that's overlaying this and you wish you like had a better relationship with your mom. Like I have had this experience of having the gift of being able to lay something out in a way where I can sort of like normalize it and bring it into the light at the same time. And so it relieves a lot of like tension and shame and maneuvering that we're doing to hide all of our parts, like from ourselves and others. And that just in and of itself is, I think, really amazing and freeing for people. In that realm, over the years, I've had a lot of people who through short-term work with me will just have the experience of having less, let's say, like shame and tension and constriction because they've been just the freedom to accept anything that arises in themselves. And in the longer term, what I see that do is decrease what we might call symptoms. Whether your symptoms are panic and anxiety, whether your symptoms are some physical manifestation like illness or digestive issues or chronic pain or headaches, or whether your symptoms are like stagnation in your business or feeling trapped in friendships or family relationships that aren't beneficial to you, like how to create healthy boundaries through compassion and love, right? So all kinds of outcomes. But my number one most favorite thing that I've experienced with people who have worked with me in the long term is having them realize how much capacity they have to tend to themselves, and that like I'm not that magical, and that they can do it. They can hold space and presence for themselves and their parts in the way that I've been modeling for them, so that as they move through their day-to-day life, they experience themselves as a completely different person. That is the parts of my work that really light me up. Like when I have clients start to be like, that the stuff we've been practicing in our time together, they are taking on and tweaking and playing with and applying to their own system in their own life, and they're noticing that they feel different on a day-to-day basis, then I'm like over the moon. So that's often like what I'll say to my longer term clients is like, eventually you just don't need me because you've gotten what you need from me and you can provide it for yourself, right? So that's my overarching model. So I think I always sort of think of myself also as like a teacher, and I'm air quoting that because there's a sense of a real belief that I don't do anything special that not any human on the planet could do if they got some practice and guidance and support. And so I'm just offering the tools and capacities that I've developed to hopefully uplift and wake up those same tools and capacities in others. And then hopefully that just continues to spread.
Let's talk a little bit about business coaching. Some of the listeners might have businesses. I personally find that fascinating. It's easier to imagine how a one-on-one session works with you. Talk about how you work with small businesses, how you work with groups, and how that shifts things.
Sure. So my experience is that like how we show up to the world is how we show up to the world. And so the beliefs that we have about ourselves and the operating system that we have and the parts that we have that affect how we are with ourselves and in our relationships are hugely show up in the way that we engage if we're entrepreneurs or if we're artists or even if we're just employees of a business, that it's all very similar. So that's part of what I do is that like if you're running a business, then a lot of the fluidity and the amplification and energizing that you're feeling in your business or not feeling in your business, it can be based on the parts of you and what they believe you're capable of and what can happen. I've also found that this thing that we're calling intuition, where I sort of like have called myself a luminary intuitive, is that I sometimes can gather or pull a sense of some strategic decisions that it might be good timing for a business or not good timing for a business. Or like, I actually often find that a business is its own energetic entity. And so if we can be with that, we can start to read the energy of the business. Like, is the business depleted? Is the business needing something? Is the business going to be able to attract the kind of money and attention that you want right now? Or is the business energy itself in a slump? And we need to kind of correct that before we move forward with something that you're wanting for the business. I help people who are running businesses with understanding their own like managerial style and how they engage with their staff or their team or people who work for them and how they can tweak that so that they are having the experience that they want of the people who work for them and or seeing what works and doesn't work in terms of teams and strategies. And then I would say not business related group work, what I've found is that when I'm in group work, often whatever's coming up for one person, if we can focus in and do some compassion, awareness, presencing for that practice actually resonates at a certain frequency with parts in each person, because we would work the energetic shifting and aligning that's happening can actually work in a whole group setting for each person who's present, whether they want to share something and invite me into conversation with them or not. I will say I did get a master's degree in counseling psych, so I sort of have that experience in my repertoire, but I never got licensed. And I chose that specifically because I found that I land in the alternative model more squarely, and I didn't want there to be any confusion about what I was doing. So I do a lot of long distance work and virtual work. And I often say to people that there is like an energy healing component to it or an energetic shifting component to it. And that like if you go to like a Reiki practitioner, you'll see someone who's using their hands to move energy. And what I say is that I use language to move energy. So my experience is that when we're in an open, present awareness state, we have the capacity to affect our reality and shift the way that our subtle bodies work and even retrain our mind. And in my experience, language can be a signifier of what's happening on the more subtle levels. And that happens a lot with me and my work with people. So I might sit in a session with someone and I might spend 5 minutes talking to them about ways that their parts could shift or compassion that could show up or presence alignment that can happen. And it's like, it's actually happening because we're languaging it the potential to happen. So that's different than just talking about stuff.
100%.
Although, are we ever just talking about stuff? I don't even know. I think language is super, super powerful. So that's me a little bit.
Okay, I know we have a couple more minutes. Last question. Is there a particular theme that you find arising in your clients or groups or businesses that you find just today or this week or this month or this year? Something that you see emerging from many different places that people are either struggling with or starting to finally get a handle of?
It's funny. Right now, this is like not the answer I want to be giving, but right now I'm noticing a lot of people. I wonder if this has to do with the astrological place we are at. I'm noticing a lot of people are working through their patterning around scarcity and financial scarcity specifically. And that is coming up in literally, I'm like thinking back about the last like 5 or 10 one-on-one sessions I've done. And I'm like, yes, 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 yes. So it's coming up a lot for a lot of people. And it's funny, I had a woman that I work with got on with me the other day, and she's like, so I'm noticing I'm in scarcity mentality around like everything, like my finances, like this. I can see it here. I can see it in my relationships. I can see it in my marriage. And she was like, so I thought we would just like do that today. And I just like started laughing. I was like, oh yeah, let's just like fix scarcity mentality around every aspect of our life today. That sounds amazing. So, you know, I'm always asking people if they can believe that their awareness can hold space for the parts of themselves that are the most scary, and believe that awareness is bigger and more vast and able to hold anything that arises. So like I was actually working with someone earlier today, and she was talking about her financial scarcity for a moment, and she like started to get emotional. She started to like cry a little bit. And then right away she was like, but it's not like we're going to starve or anything. And so to me, I'm like, well, there's a part that's really afraid of financial scarcity. And then there's a part that's afraid that the fear of financial scarcity is so great that it's going to overwhelm the system. So the organizer manager comes in and goes like, no, but on the spreadsheet, it says we have enough money for food, so we shouldn't worry, right? That is true, and it is stabilizing. But if we can get the manager to step aside for a minute, and we can believe that our awareness can hold space for the fear of the part that's so overwhelmed by the sense of scarcity that it's going to bring us to tears. When we can practice that and see the sustainability, like, yes, I can hold for that part of me that's afraid, that's when we start to experience change.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. So if you're listening and you're like, this is incredible, I resonate, I want more of this, where can people find you? What kind of experiences can they get into with you, besides the fact that we have a retreat in Costa Rica in November? I think we have 1 or 2 spots left. We're going to close it really soon because the rooms are in really high demand. But just throwing
so if you're listening and you can get a spot at the retreat in Costa Rica, I will say this will be my 3rd year being involved in Costa Rica with Katie and EARTHAURA, and it is like, it's the real deal. It's worth being there. Super transformational, really amazing. Can't say enough good things about it. And I feel very lucky and humbled to be included. So if you can grab the last spot, go for it. If not, I have a website, which is soyala.com. And on there, you can book one-on-one sessions with me, or on a one-off deal or in packages. And also, you can email me anytime you want and ask me to put together something for you, because that's how I do the business packages, is by people approaching me and we look at how large their business is and what they're actually looking for and how we can put that together. If you have questions for me and you're just unsure, on my website, you can book a 10-minute free call with me just to feel it out and see how you think we might fit. You can put yourself on my mailing list if you want to get newsletters from me or learn anything else. And I will, if you're in the Massachusetts, New England area, I will be teaching one live in-person class here in Massachusetts, starting again probably in October of 2019. So if you want to know about that, you can send me an email to make sure that you can get that information from me. And I'm also on Instagram and Facebook, although I'm not always social media consistent, but we'll see.
And how about for 2020, we get you in Phoenix doing some live teaching?
That would be amazing. I'd love to be in Phoenix doing live teaching in 2020.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, anyone, you always can reach me through, anything, Sound Center, EARTHAURA retreats, LOTUSWEI. They always know how to track me down. And I've been in contact with all of you forever. So that's an easy connection also.
Okay. Thanks so much, Robin. Any last words of wisdom that you want to throw in?
Oh man, I think that I would just say that being a human can be kind of challenging sometimes. But for those of us who have the capacity, whether it's the time or the space or the financial means or the, whatever it is that has set us up to have a little bit of bandwidth available to do some of this practice and work, that I think it's really, really important. And I think that, all of humanity needs any human that can awaken a little bit to do that. There are some humans that are in circumstances where their suffering is greater than that we can imagine. And so those of us who aren't kind of need to do the waking up and get things back in balance for all of humanity. So just asking for that.
Another way to get more of Robin as well is to listen to episodes 13 and 86, highly recommended. Lots of practices and wisdom-filled methods for flourishing and thriving in everyday life. So you can also go back and check out those episodes. Thank you, Robin, so much for making the time to be with us.
Yeah, and also you guys can send any questions you have for me to Katie through the podcast, and we can get those set up for our next one.
Yes, great idea. All right, thanks, Robin.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to the Flower Lounge. I'm Katie Hess, and we'll be releasing a new podcast every Wednesday. If you like what you heard, or you know someone who might be touched by our conversation, share it with them. And don't forget to subscribe. To find out what your favorite flowers mean about you, take the quiz at LOTUSWEI.com.